Well, they've never taught history properly in Virginia. So we start from the wrong place. I mean, essentially this was a slave state from the beginning. It was based on the intention of enslaving Native Americans. When that could not happen, they enslaved white people for the first 80 years, and when they couldn't do that any longer, they enslaved black people. We ended up with a half revolution, which we've always been taught was the American Revolution, but in fact, 50% of the population went into freedom, and 50% of the population went into a privatized slave state that is a totalitarian state, which was just as restrictive as the Soviet Union and other slave states in the world.
But slavery really takes off in Richmond in the 19th century as Richmond becomes a manufacturing city. And we don't often think about slavery as associated with industrialization or with manufacturing, but Richmond is a city that mills flour and takes tobacco and turns it into chewing tobacco, and slave labor is used in the factories there.
It wasn't just one site or two sites. There were close to 100 sites connected with the slave trade. And for the 30 years before the end of the Civil War and emancipation, this area here, maybe 12, 15 acres, was the center for the domestic slave trade.
The places associated with slavery that we think of today were actually quite well hidden away from the public. The presence, though, of enslaved people was everywhere in the city of Richmond. Would have been impossible not to be aware that you were in a city in which slavery was fundamental to the economy.
One of the really strangest things about Richmond is the absence of information about the slave market. 20 years ago, nobody in town knew about the slave market. It had been between 300 and 500,000 people were sold right down there, taken from their homes. It was a kind of a second Middle Passage, and sent into these horrible torture chambers, which were the southern cotton fields. And most of them never heard of again by their family. That slave market there was 50% of the Richmond economy. I'm sitting here looking down at the slave market and feeling that depth of despair in that hole in this city, this gash of despair within the city. And that hangs here.
So we don't have those physical remnants. Obviously we can walk the ground and feel the pull of what happened there, but we don't have the buildings left.
It was known that this was the site of Lumpkin's jail. So the James River Institute for Archaeology did a dig here, and they expected to find some artifacts. What they found was the foundation for Lumpkin's jail, the adjoining tavern slash hotel where Lumpkin entertained slave owners when they came to examine the wares, and a kitchen, a building that cooked food for both the visitors and for the inmates. Their plans was just to get the artifacts and then, I guess, leave it as a parking lot. They certainly did that with the African burial ground until a community struggle over 10 years forced VCU to lift the parking lot. The Smithsonian Institute came down and did a story for their magazine, said it was the most significant archaeological discovery in the whole country of any type in the last decade.
In other cities of the world, people are drawn to the center of a city. What are people fleeing? What unknown stuff is happening in the spirit? We deal with these deep things that get carried down, and people notice it when they come to town. They'll tell you something doesn't feel right.
Up here on Broad Street is a state historical marker called the Execution of Gabriel that tells the story of the rebellion and his capture and his execution here at the African burial ground. We put that up. The defenders put that up in 2004. Up till that time, there was no official government recognition of Gabriel, and there still is almost nothing.
114,000 Africans imported to Virginia. That's all. There were 300,000 persons of African descent in Virginia at the time of the American Revolution. number had tripled. Between 300 and 500,000 people were sold out of this place. That's a massive.
It's likely that the majority of black people in the country, and maybe Canada and Mexico, could trace some ancestry to Shockoe Bottom.
Even though, you know, we're 150 years removed from that, generations of poverty, it's hard to get over that. Understanding what are the conditions that cause this community to be the way it is now. And it's very much related to a history. It's understanding how building the interstate cut off the black community from the rest of the city and how that impacts you when there's a concentration of poverty.
And one of the things that happened in 1970 was that they created a highway system for newly suburbanized white people and left public transportation in the inner city only for lower income black people.
Jackson Ward, unfortunately, was badly damaged when the interstate was built through. And one of the, for me at least, telling signs is if you go to the Maggie Walker house on Lee Street and you see the place where the first woman bank president lived, and then you step out and look up 2nd Street to the interstate. Across the interstate you can see the office building that the bank had, the Order of St. Luke had, where she would work. And the interstate provides this huge barrier between it, but at the time she lived there, it would have been easy walking distance. For us, the damage done by the interstate makes it difficult to get back to what the Harlem of the South was really like in the 20s and 30s.
I remember being a child, if you go down Monument Avenue, there's the statue of Arthur Ashe, which is really random because it's all these Confederate soldiers, and then there's Arthur Ashe holding a tennis racket, which really kind of looks like he's about to beat the children that are looking up at him. And I remember being a kid when that came out, and people were so angry. They were so angry that there would be this statue of Arthur Ashe on this street. And again, I was like, why are they angry? Why would they be angry that, you know, he was a great tennis player that's from Richmond? It kind of makes sense we'd have a statue. But there's this history, you know, when you think about Richmond as the former capital of the Confederacy, you know, there's a lot of pride in that.
The depth of our despair gives us the potential for healing that many other places do not have. And that's the thing we need to seize a hold of, because this ugliness starts here, but the values are also first proclaimed here.
It's pretty cool to be a Richmond native and to be a place where history is still very much alive, and we're able to kind of appreciate and understand it and learn from the things that we did well and also our mistakes. People are just really interested about preserving the history, but also trying to use that to move forward as a successful city that is integrated and appreciates the diverse perspectives we all have.
We have to, as a city, as a population, be involved, and it's not just for historians or planners or others to tell people what to do.
Democracy says that all of us are rulers. That's what the word means. The people are rulers. And therefore, when the thing is unjust and not right, it's not our ruler's fault, it's the fault of all of us. And therefore, we have the responsibility collectively to act as governors, to the extent we can to change the system so that it is properly set up.
The suffering is important and the resistance is important, but just as important is to understand that the money made here and the export of human beings, which was the largest industry in Virginia for many years, created the capital that was the basis for the development of the economic system we call capitalism in the United States. This is where it came from.